Earlier this month, tensions spiked in the South China Sea near Scarborough Shoal, a disputed maritime feature claimed by China, the Philippines, and Taiwan. On August 11th, during a Philippine Coast Guard resupply mission called Katawa para sa Bagong Bayang Mangangista, Philippine ships, including the BRP Sulwan, operated near the shoal alongside civilian fishing boats. At the same time, China's Type 052D destroyer Gillen and a Chinese Coast Guard cutter maneuvered aggressively to block the Philippine vessels. Journalists on board documented reckless moves, including high-speed tailing and attempts to cut across the Sulwan's bow. In the chaos, the cutter collided with the destroyer, leaving the smaller vessel badly damaged. Reports out of Manila suggested that at least 2 Chinese Coast Guard personnel may have died, though Beijing has not confirmed any casualties. The following day, August 12th, the U.S. Navy entered the picture. The guided missile destroyer USS Higgins, along with the littoral combat ship USS Cincinnati, conducted a freedom of navigation operation in international waters near the shoal. China's Southern Theater Command immediately announced that it had tracked, warned, and expelled the Higgins from what it called Chinese territorial waters. The U.S. Navy flatly rejected that claim. A spokesperson from the 7th Fleet emphasized that the Higgins' transit was consistent with international law and that the ship left the area on its own after completing the mission. Washington underscored its long-standing position that U.S. forces will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, a direct counter to Beijing's sweeping territorial claims. The incident quickly drew global attention, especially because it followed the unusual collision between Chinese ships during efforts to block Philippine operations. Philippine officials denounced the collision as dangerous and destabilizing, while U.S. officials stressed that China's increasingly aggressive tactics, ranging from close shadowing to high-speed blockades, pose serious risks in contested waters. Sending the Higgins and the Cincinnati close to Scarborough Shoal was not only about asserting legal rights. It was also a visible show of support for the Philippines and other regional partners facing growing pressure from Beijing. The fallout spread beyond the immediate area. Japan, Australia, and New Zealand all expressed concern and urged restraint. Australia, in particular, ramped up cooperation with the Philippines, launching the largest ever joint exercises between the two countries. Codenamed Alone, the drills featured beach assaults, fighter aircraft, naval destroyers, and special forces in operations staged close to contested waters. Observers from the U.S., Canada, South Korea, Indonesia, and New Zealand joined, making the message of regional solidarity unmistakable. Analysts say this confrontation highlights an escalating pattern in the South China Sea. China increasingly uses gray zone tactics, maritime militia boats, Coast Guard ships, and now even frontline warships, to enforce its sweeping claims without directly starting a war. The involvement of a high-end destroyer like the Gillen in harassing Philippine vessels marked a sharp escalation. For the U.S. and its allies, these maneuvers cannot go unanswered. Washington has already begun strengthening its missile deployments in the Philippines and deepening naval cooperation across the Indo-Pacific to counterbalance China's growing reach. For Beijing, claiming to have expelled an American destroyer was meant to project dominance at home and abroad. But the U.S. denial and continued patrols showed that its presence is not going away. Each side's narrative tells a different story, yet the broader reality is clear. The risk of an incident spiraling out of control is rising. A simple miscalculation, like the Chinese collision earlier this month, could spark a crisis involving not just China and the Philippines, but also the U.S. and its allies in many ways. The standoff at Scarborough Shoal captured the essence of the broader struggle in the South China Sea. China is pushing its boundaries further each year, using forceful tactics to turn disputed waters into de facto zones of control. The U.S., on the other hand, is determined to prevent that outcome by keeping sea lanes open and international law intact. Countries in the region are increasingly drawn into this competition, choosing to side with the U.S. for security guarantees or risk being squeezed by China's dominance. The message from Washington was unambiguous. Freedom of navigation will not be ceded. The message from Beijing was equally blunt. Challenges to its claims will be met with forceful pushback. With warships maneuvering only a few miles apart and regional militaries stepping up exercises, The waters of the South China Sea are now one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world.